Welcome to our very first Deal Room episode where we pick apart the deals and acquisitions happening across different verticals in field service. And according to Statista, the number of M&A transactions have grown exponentially throughout the years, going from a couple of thousand transactions back in the 80s all the way to over 60,000 transactions in 2021, 2022. And we're not talking about small numbers. Just a few hundred mega deals amounted to over $4 billion in M&A value, transaction value. You can just imagine how much the rest of the 50,000 plus deals were worth. And for this episode, we'll be doing a deep dive into a certain vertical in field service, kind of like a piece of the pie in the M&A sphere, so to speak, and look at how much, what's the size of the market, who are the main acquirers in the market, and maybe zoom in on one of the major acquirers and look at their strategy and dive into their M&A motion. And joining me, as always, my co-host Giner Ozgul. Giner, how's it going?
Good. Looking forward to having a conversation here today.
This is going to be exciting because for this episode, we're going to get into this vertical that I've been very keen on for some time now, janitorial services. Just like in the last episode where, Giner, you talked about how everybody needs a roof over their head. Similarly, everyone needs a clean space. So what are your thoughts on this vertical, Giner? And have you played in this in the janitorial services industry before?
Not directly. I worked for this little company you may have heard of called Ecolab at one point in my past. So they don't do janitorial services, but of course they provide a lot of the sanitizing, and cleaning chemicals that a lot of these services might use in their facilities. So I've had some exposure to that because of that business and working with my counterparts there over the years. Super interesting business, right? I mean, we can't live somewhere without it being clean.
Absolutely.
So, there's a bare human necessity of what we're going to talk about here today.
And more so on the commercial side. And, before going live here, you and I were chatting about how, COVID, this industry took a big hit in COVID. However, we've seen some uptick in certain sectors or niche markets inside commercial janitorial services. And it took a little bit of while to recover. Maybe you can speak a little bit to that, Giner, and talk about how the market is trending now.
Yeah, the way I might think about it is there was a normalcy to the market going into COVID where janitorial services or cleaning services in general across different verticals were necessary, right? And there was an equilibrium there, and then COVID happened, right? So janitorial services and a lot of the end markets went down just because, your commercial properties, your multi-unit residential, a lot of places you may have seen universities were shut down either partially or wholly shut down, which means janitorial services or the frequency wasn't needed as much. You did see a lot in hospitals and healthcare because, of course, with that patient turnover, that piece of the pie became bigger.
And they were paying premium. My brother-in-law actually has a commercial janitorial services in Bend. And man, they boomed. They couldn't find enough people to fill the demand during COVID.
Yeah, but what the recognition was how much work that was, right? In the hospital space. But then, as COVID came out, and I would say, especially here in America, the return to office or return to work, depending on what terminology you use, really didn't start to, what I'll say, fully recover until early 2022, maybe early to mid 2022, which is only a couple of years ago, that you start to see people come to the office 3 to 4 days a week, maybe 5 in some cases, depending on where you're at in the country, and universities going to pretty much full classes again. So a lot of those end verticals, you started to see kind of this commercial play. And with people leaving homes to go back to work, they also needed the janitorial services in their homes again.
Absolutely.
Right? So those housekeeping activities to get their homes clean. So that cycle started to return. and I'd say early to mid 2022.
But would you say also for those for private equity, that may have even presented an opportunity? Would you say?
Yeah, well, for sure, right? Because in that cycle, outside of the companies like your family members who are in the hospital space, a lot of those other janitorial firms, where although they were okay, they were significantly down in revenue and volume, hence significant, more than likely down in profits as well. So there's an opportunity then to come in essentially and buy a number of assets and create a platform business in a less difficult space because the scale is much smaller.
Yes, and talking about the market, I think this is a great segue to maybe look at some of the numbers in janitorial. And I was blown away looking at how huge this market is. The global market is $300 billion. I was not expecting to see that. And about 30% of the market share is in the US with over 1.2 million businesses. Wow. Can you just imagine that with a growth rate of 3.6% year over year? So every year you're seeing tens of thousands of new janitorial businesses entering the market. So are the barriers to entry, Giner, that low? So
yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're talking about specific areas like healthcare, once again, which we'd have to set aside, the barriers to entry are, can you get a workforce to do the work? Do you have the competency to devise a process and or an operating procedure to go do the janitorial service? And then do you have access to the right chemicals or cleaning agents in order to perform it well, right? So like, if you can do those three things, you can start up a janitorial business.
Right.
But like other businesses, it's got its faults and its troubles,
right.
and you better be a good business person too. So I want to give those folks a lot of credit, especially the successful ones.
Exactly.
But I mean, the barriers of entry, competency, access to some level of capital and chemical and people, obviously. And, if you think of the 5 years you have there, 2018 to 2023, that people piece, especially from 2020 to now, the last 2 years or so, as unemployment started to increase, the pool of talent started to increase in your ability to access
Absolutely. And I think also maybe like if you go on YouTube and type janitorial services, you would see, or services business to start, you would see janitorial as one of the like go-to business ideas that almost anyone can start, whether you're in college or you just don't want to get another job, or so it's a low barrier to entry, and the startup capital is not that much, right? And if you get the contract, it's like paying for the cow from its own milk, right? It's like you get the contract, you buy the equipment or the janitorial products, and it just feeds itself. So it's very easy to start.
Well, and there's also a basic human thing here, right? It's always easier to ask somebody else to clean it than you to clean it yourself.
There
So the service is an output of a behavior, and the behavior we all have is, a lot of us go to work 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And the last thing we want to go home is, vacuum our floors or clean our bathrooms or clean tiles. And instead, what we say is there a service out there to come do it, right? And to be clear, janitorial as a definition isn't limited to commercial properties, which is where everybody immediately goes through. Janitorial and residential is a big deal. Janitorial in ancillary services, like, here in a few minutes, we'll talk about one of these companies that fleet washing, right? That's a janitorial service.
Let's move into that. So talking about the major acquirers in the market. So tell me about that more.
Yeah, so if you look at the middle one, kept company, Fleet Wash, as a person that was part of a service business where you had, thousands of vehicles in your service fleet, your image and your branding in front of end customers is really important. And what's the number one thing customers are going to see about your image and branding is your driving billboard, right? Which is your vehicles. So if they're dirty and they don't represent your brand or image properly, you want to make sure you find a solution like, what's here with Fleet Wash that's able to with some regularity, bring your drivers in and bring your vehicles in and keep them clean and keeping your brand and your image controlled in front of your end markets.
Right. And you know what's interesting looking at these companies, maybe other than the facilities group, but even the facilities group like Janitorial is just one service and a portfolio. So
That's right.
I couldn't find like a big acquirer, with over say 10, 15 acquisitions that just didn't have like a portfolio of services. So it's interesting to see that this is typically an add-on service, or it could be a core service, but it's part of a portfolio. Like you look at Allied Universal here, they've made 100 acquisitions, but Janitorial is only one part of what they do. Neighborly, they're like a franchise service business.
Yep.
Like they have, Mon loans, loaning Mons, and pest control and plumbing. You look at Kepwash, like you said, it started as fleet washing business, not necessarily commercial commercial services, janitorial commercial services. You look at KBS, the same. The facilities group though, they're very specialist.
Well, if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Your customer acquisition costs are really high typically in any business. It's hard to get a customer and keep them. You know this about your own business, right? But here you are, you acquire a business that's doing a home, let's just say in the janitorial space. And now that you've integrated that business into your other services, lawn services is an example. Now I can introduce that homeowner to my lawn services business, and now I pick up another incremental piece of business that I may or may not have had, right? If I had it, then I make myself what I'll call stickier, and it's harder for a customer to leave when you have more services, because then they got to find more companies or another one like you to replace, right? Or if you don't have it, it's, hey, the comfort of, wouldn't it be nice to just deal with one company for all your services as opposed to 5? So there's a value proposition there that's very powerful when, we're all people on the move. Again, human behavior is what drives all of this, right? You and I are on the move all the time. We're working a lot. The last thing I want to do is call my lawn guy, call my, janitorial services person, call somebody who cleans my gutters, call somebody else who cuts my trees.
Plumbing
it just becomes a lot of work when I just don't have the time for it. So the convenience factor for me as a human being enables these companies to go drive that value proposition back.
And more so for busy business owners and executives.
That's right.
So that's a very good observation. And I think so that also dictates your M&A strategy, wouldn't it? Looking at other companies that you could acquire to open up new markets or to expand your product portfolio and drive growth. In our previous episode, you talked about how growth synergy, yes, you always want to look for cost synergies, right?
That's
obviously, right. But really what makes the private equity world go around is growth.
Organic. Organic growth. There's growth synergies here, right? If you think about all of these businesses, their suite of offerings to their end markets makes them very valuable from an organic synergy standpoint. There's also a protection piece, right? So if one of your businesses, if one of your businesses is having a tough year, right, for whatever reason, they're just, janitorial down a little bit. Now you got a whole suite of other businesses that can offset some of that as you figure that out, right? So there's a lot of strategy in play here to grow these businesses. But I think in general, janitorial addresses a very basic human need, right? For cleanliness and comfort around it. And, the investment of our homes or the investment of our workplaces, all of those things are important. Like if you think of a commercial property as an example, you invest hundreds of thousands up to millions of dollars to build out a commercial property, right? And then you depreciate it for 5, 10, 20, 25 years. So how are you going to keep that property looking great so that you don't need incremental capital to redo that property in a shorter period of time? Well, the upkeep of it costs you, it's an expense, but it's much less expense or cash out the door in the short term than the incremental capital you're going to need to go rebuild it or remodel it in a shorter period of time.
Absolutely. I love it. And what we did here is, we took a closer look at KEP with Anthony DiGiovanni at the helm of the company, and it was more recently acquired by Acon Investment, and these guys have done over 20 acquisitions. What does it take, to make
It's a lot of work.
Successful acquisitions?
I'll tell you, as a CEO in this industry, 20 acquisitions is a lot, and kudos to them for thinking about it and the integration to put those businesses together successfully. Right, that's a lot of work. Takes a lot of teams and a lot of collaborations across all your functions. HR, finance, IT. I'm probably leaving a couple of those functions out, but they all have to work together in harmony to make this work. And it's a lot of energy, right? Because your smallest acquisition is still as much work as your largest one, because the activities in the playbook that's necessary to integrate those businesses is the same. Now, it might be a little less effort, right? Because it's just less transactions or something like that, or less people, but the work itself is still hard to each one of these acquisitions. So I think it's a very big deal that they're doing it, and it's a very big deal that they're doing it successfully to their end markets.
Absolutely. And these guys made their first acquisition in the 80s, in the 85. Before they started, and the business started in the 70s, 73, very much like your previous platform at SmartGear, right? It was a really old or not necessarily old, but a family business. It has its origin story, and then it grew from there, and more recently started to taking off. So what I picked up though here, Giner, is the recapitalization with DFW Capital Partners. As a platform, when are you looking for recapitalization, and how do you allocate, this influx of new capital? When does private equity decide to recapitalize?
Well, I don't know what recapital means here, but there's a couple versions of this. To answer your question is, there could be an entry partner that comes in that says, hey, I'm really interested in that business. I'd like to be a partner with it and help you grow it. Sometimes they have reach into other adjoining businesses that they bring in to the portfolio. So they may have companies that they own that they want to bring in, right? Or they may have end markets where they have reach, where they think they can help the organic growth a lot faster. So there's a value proposition that incremental capital partner brings to the table. Typically, it's not just capital. People always think, well, they're just throwing money into the pot.
I love what you said there, and this is actually was looking at their more recent acquisition, Giant Enterprises. This acquisition did allow them to bring more specialized services, like you said, to their client. So it's interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, there's usually a tie to that. And then what happens is the collaboration creates incremental value, right? So you always want the 1 + 1 = 3 or more, right? So now that I have a partner who brings value to the table, the combined entity is now worth something more than it was by itself, right? So again, the recapitalization, there's also continuation funds, and you get into a lot of complexity depending on the outputs of the organizations. But at the end of the day, it's kind of what we talked about in the last podcast. If you guys didn't listen to that one, go listen to it.
Yes.
Remember, the private equities are in the business of creating successful businesses, right? So, and that means if they need to continue funding it, if they need to bring in another partner, if another partner just wants to come in, if there is an output that shows success or an ability to grow exponentially, they're going to take that avenue.
I love it. And there you have it, our first Deal Room episode. It's really eye-opening to be diving into these different verticals. Definitely expands my knowledge of the market and the different verticals, and seeing the different M&A motions and how they play out in different verticals. And we'll be looking to do more of these and dive into a lot more verticals. And if you'd like us to focus on any particular vertical, let me know in the comments below if there's an interesting market or sector that you want us to do a deep dive on. And then also we're looking to do maybe a more of a round table where we invite all the expert audience that we have, the M&A practitioners, the executives. I definitely enjoy tapping into Keener's expertise, but I think there's also value in bringing everyone in our audience here and kind of tap into that collective genius that exists between my network and Keener's network, and have a more rich conversation and bring in different perspectives. So if you would be open to joining us on our first M&A roundtable next month, feel free to leave a comment below or reach out to me or to Keener, and would love to jam with you. And that's all. And once again, look, thank you so much for tuning in. Give us a like, give us a share, share it with your colleagues and friends, and give us some feedback. How what we're doing good, what could we do better, other topics or areas we can do a deep dive on. And like always, Keener, I'm always grateful for your expertise and for your wisdom and insights, and sharing with us your hard-won wisdom on what it takes to be a successful platform in private equity and scale that platform in today's market.
It's great. Well, thank you for having me. And working with you and your team has been great. And I can't wait till the next episode.
I love it. Awesome. So there you have it, folks. This is Yassine and Keener signing off. Thank you.